you for being at this meeting. Riverside County Housing and Workforce Solutions 2021 ESG Pre-Bidders Conference. My name is Emma Perez Singh, and I am the COC Administrative Services Manager. Welcome to everyone. We are pleased to have you here. We will have Martha and Rashana on our team presenting the information for the RFP. There will be additional information in the presentation, which will be recorded and should be available for everyone after the recording.
All right, thank you guys. So as Emma mentioned, this is going to be recorded. I have started the recording. We're on the screen right now is showing the agenda. I'm sorry, my name is Martha Samaniego. I'm one of the program specialists here. I'm in charge of the 2021 ESG RFP. If you have not received or are not sure how to access the RFP or need any of the forms in fillable portion, just let me know. You can send me an email at the email provided, which is msamanie@rivco.org. It'll also be at the very end with all my information if you need that as well, okay? So as far as the agenda, we are going to be going over the RFP, the Board of Governance funding principles, available funding, eligible activities, our funding sources for 2021, timeline and important dates, local evaluation process, our Exhibit A of the RFP, and the state of California funding process, along with the budget and any questions at the end. Okay. So this is a non-mandatory pre-bid conference, and it is for the street outreach and rapid rehousing for 2021 ESG annual allocation. We will have the terms and conditions, attachment 4, which is the time and activity report, and that is usually provided by our fiscal team, and they are on the line as well, so they will be presenting a couple slides later on. Next slide.
Martha, if you want to remind them about signing in, just in case.
Okay, yes, if everybody could please sign in so that I have an attendance of who is here, I would appreciate it. I'm going to hand it over to Rashana now for the COC Board of Governance Funding Principles.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rashana Walker. I am one of the senior program specialists here with Housing and Workforce Solution, and we will be going through the COC Board of Governance funding principles. So the Riverside County Continuum of Care Board of Governance, they established some funding principles that guide and prioritize the way we allocate funding for homeless programs. One of the first funding principles is invest in strategies and programs that support the homeless strategic action plan, emphasizing the expansion of system coordination, housing resources, outreach, navigation, and supportive services, and provider, city, regional government, and system capacity. The next principle is invest in programs that demonstrate ongoing, long-term, and sustainable results. The third funding principle is invest in multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional solutions to address health, safety, and housing needs. And the next principle is invest in innovative approaches that expand the supply of safe, humane housing placement, focused shelter, and interim housing models. And The next principle is invest in the creation of an expanded supply of affordable and supportive housing opportunities. And lastly, but certainly not least, is invest in programs that support County of Riverside, Department of Housing and Workforce Solutions, and the Continuum of Care Homelessness Action Plan, emphasizing the expansion of system coordination, outreach, navigation, and supportive services, along with housing resources. And the link to our homelessness action plan is located on this slide, which you will have access to.
So next, we're going to go over the overview of the 2021 ESG funding that's available through the Housing and Workforce Solutions. Next slide, please. So what is Emergency Solutions Grant Program? ESG provides shelter and services to help persons experiencing homelessness or persons at risk of homelessness regain housing stability. Next slide. The funding availability, this is for the 2021 ESG annual allocation. The California Department of Housing and Community Development received approximately $6 million in funds, federal funds. The County of Riverside Housing and Workforce Solutions Continuum of Care, we received an allocation of $330,638. It is available for agencies to apply through our RFP process. $170,638 is for our rapid rehousing, and $160 is allocated to street outreach. I do want to mention, I didn't put it on the slide, but the City of Riverside did receive its own allocation, and so that is separate from ours. They serve the City of Riverside and the City of Moreno Valley. If you are servicing those two areas, you would not be able to get funding under our allocation. However, if you are an agency that is servicing multiple regions aside from the City of Riverside and the City of Moreno Valley, you are still welcome to apply. Next slide. We do have the project types, which is the 2021 ESG Rapid Rehousing and 2021 ESG Street Outreach. Next slide. So eligible activities for 2021 ESG. An example of these eligible activities for rental assistance and rental arrears. So for short-term rental assistance, we can do up to 3 months. Medium-term rental assistance, we can do more than 3 months, but not more than 24 months. And for rental arrears, we are able to do the one-time payment up to 6 months. And this is going to count towards the amount of rental assistance available total for that period of time, okay? The financial assistance includes rental application fees, security and utility deposits, utility payments, and last month's rent or moving costs. These services also can be provided, which are housing search and placement, housing stability, case management, landlord-tenant mediation, and tenant legal services and credit repair. I want to emphasize those last few, if you could just go back a second. I know a lot of times we forget that those are services that we can provide. So just as a friendly reminder, those are available for us to provide our clients. So keep that in mind when you're applying and be as detailed as possible when you are completing the application. Okay, next slide. For the 2021 ESG, income limit has not changed. That the income limit is the 30% of the area median income to receive or continue to receive homeless prevention or continue receiving rapid rehousing assistance. There is a cap of 60% for emergency shelter and street outreach with ESG funding. And there is a 100% match requirement. We have provided the link to the HUD income limits at the very bottom. And again, it'll be provided in the PowerPoint so you're able to look that up. Next slide. So for this, pre-contracting costs are only allowable to the date for which HCD signed the ESG contract or the ESG grant agreement with the department. And environmental clearance and habitability reviews need to be conducted before any funds are expended on temporary shelters. Next slide. So here's a list of ineligible expenses. They have not changed. Acquisition of real property, new construction, rehab of structures to the extent that the structures are used for inherently religious activities, no mortgage payments, no inpatient detoxification and other inpatient drug or alcohol treatments, and no legal services for immigration and citizenship matters and issues relating to mortgages. Next slide. So here we are going to go over the timeline of important dates for the RFP evaluation process, along with the scope of work, which is Exhibit A in the RFP. Next slide. So we did release the RFP on April 18th. We're having the pre-bidders conference today. Please make sure to have your questions, your bidders questions, by 4/29 at 1:30. We do need those as promptly as possible. The bidders Q&A will be posted to the COC and the public purchasing website on May 3rd. We will have the local competition for the RFP bidders submitted closing date, which is May 9th, 1:30 p.m. So anything I receive after 1:30 p.m. via email, I will not be able to accept. So please make sure to keep that date. 5/11 is the date for preparing our 2021 ESG summary of proposals received. And we will be reviewing the proposal threshold and evaluations along with scoring between May 11th and May 31st. On June 1st, we will have a clarification and final offers. And June 16th, the award recommendation and approval in the BOG meeting is anticipated. The following 2 dates are tentative. The expected receipt of the standard agreement, along with the subrecipient agreement execution with vendors, is June and July of 2022. And lastly, 100% of the 2021 ESG funds must be expended by May 31st of 2023. Next slide, please. So for the threshold review, the proposal submitted by the bidder's closing deadline will receive a threshold review. It's either pass or fail to ensure that the application is complete and complies with the grant's minimum criteria. The requirements are very clear in the RFP. If you make sure to look at the required sections, which are going to be Exhibit A through G in the RFP, once you hit Exhibit H, that is just the
Subrecipient.
The example, I'm sorry, I'm losing my thought. the subrecipient example. So A through G are the important sections to look at in the RFP. Next slide. So for organizational eligibility requirements, we are looking at agency type, experience, organizational capacity, and other requirements which may include current or planned COC membership. And they must be eligible to receive federal funds and not be on the federal exclusion list. Next slide. The evaluation and scoring process. So we will have a non-conflicted review panel, which will be convened to review proposals that have met the minimum threshold criteria. The review panel will score and rank each application using the scoring criteria. The highest possible score is 100 points. Successful completion will demonstrate the most alignment with the COC Board of Governance funding principles, and the funding recommendations will be presented to the VOG. Next slide. Our evaluation process. Applicants' experience and ability technical capability and project methodology, overall best value to the county, and references with demonstrated success with similar work to scope of services. This would be pass or fail. Next slide. Here's just the scoring summary. I'll go through it briefly. I will be, again, providing the PowerPoint for you to look at in more detail, but we will look at the program design, which is 25 points. The project has the highest potential to immediately impact a reduction in homelessness. The need for funding and cost effectiveness is 35 points. So the project proposes low cost for housing units or service provisions. Next slide, please. We will have also the impact and effectiveness, which is 20 points. The project proposes achievable outcomes, and that keyword is achievable, outcomes to immediately reduce or prevent homelessness. Next, we have continuum of care requirements, which is 10 points. The project complies, participate, and implement the Board of Governance funding principles. Again, if you go back into one of the previous slides where the homeless action plan is at, you'll be able to look at all of those funding principles. And then implementation timeliness. So that's 10 points. The project timeline demonstrates bidder's ability to deliver services or start capital improvement activities within 60 days of contract award. That is a key dates, which is make sure to start it within the 60 days of the contract being awarded. Next slide. So our RFP Exhibit A, project type. We're going to have you submit one complete and separate scope of services for each proposal project consistent with the eligible activities. Bidders shall address all criteria questions listed in the scope of services, providing a complete and concise response. Very important to make sure that you are detailed, that you have all the information that is requested in the question so that we're able to score you properly. Next slide. Our scope of services includes the project type, program design, need for funds, cost effectiveness, impact and effectiveness, continuum of care requirements, implementation timeliness, and the service area. Next slide. Okay, and so the following will be presented by our fiscal team. So Brandon, if you could go ahead and take over, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brandon Trojo. I am the principal accountant here at the Department of Housing and Workforce Solutions for the Continuum of Care Division. So I'm here to discuss our cost proposal and budget narrative. Definitely very happy to see all of you here. Very excited that there's a lot of interest in our ESG 2021 grant. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, and we'll take a look at some of these sections of our RFP. So definitely we need to know what your budget is going to look like for your ESG activities that you're applying for. This includes the match contributions because there is a 100% match requirement per federal regulations for the ESG program. And this requirement is passed on through the state to us and therefore to the subrecipients as well. So in this budget, we want to know what your proposed budget is for your staffing and non-staffing costs, as well as your what your match contributions are going to be and what's the source going to be. It can be an in-kind match. It can also be a cash match from your organization providing services. So we have a minimum and a maximum grant amount to make sure that our applications are within a reasonable range, and that way we can make sure that we devote the maximum amount of attention that we can to your application. So the minimum grant amount that we are asking is $75,000. So we ask that all applications be within the $75,000 to $200,000 range. And if we could go ahead and move on to the next slide. In terms of the staffing as well, we do need to see a list of position titles as well as a brief job description for each staff person. And as well, duty statements for all position titles. And the position title must match the duty statement in terms of we need to make sure that it's reasonable that this person with this title is performing these particular tasks. And then that, of course, ties back into the ask, because we just need to make sure that the budget for staffing is reasonable based on the staffing positions that we see listed. And we've also got a budget here because we know that a lot of programs are not funded solely through one grant. And in fact, because there is a 100% match requirement, there's definitely going to be other sources of funding to the program to meet that match requirement. And so this is where you'll break down how much is going to be coming from ESG and how much is going to be coming from whatever other grants or funding sources that you may have to provide that match, and any other services that you'll be providing for this program. We also are looking for a budget narrative here. So that's including a detail of each line item listed on your budget, including a calculation of how you arrived at that budget. So if you're going to help X number of people with rental assistance, you know, how, for example, you know, a breakdown of what that looks like, or street outreach, or any way that you're deriving that number that you're requesting. And definitely the more detail, the better it will be to help us out to understand what you're requesting. We also need to know about your financial accounting system a little bit. So that narrative, we definitely want to have evidence of internal and external coordination. How does your organization coordinate within the organization as well as outside of it, and an adequate financial accounting system. And this is really important because federal grants, such as this one, do require that certain standards according to the federal regulations in 2 CFR 200. And so we need to make sure that there's a good system of internal controls and an adequate accounting system to keep track of everything properly. And we're also looking for financial statements because one of, as you saw earlier, one of the key focuses of the COC is to invest in programs that demonstrate ongoing, long-term, or sustainable results. And also, we need to make sure that our organizations are sustainable, because we need to make sure that you have the financial resources to provide the services for the length of the grant. And this is a reimbursement grant. So basically, you would submit the claims to us, and then within 30 to 45 days, and we're doing our best to make this a quicker process than that. But you always want to plan for the worst case scenario, or the longest amount of time, then we would issue reimbursement. So as part of this analysis, we do need a balance sheet and an income statement from within the past 12 months. So these do have slightly different names if you're in government or not for profit, but basically we need that balance sheet to see where your assets and liabilities are, and your income statement to see what you're bringing in and what you're spending out. Also, a statement of cash flows. We're not requiring that, but it's always a great idea. More information is always better. Bidders must have the financial stability to support services that are being offered. We definitely need to make sure that these services can be provided. These are very important, critical services So we want to make sure that they can be provided for the life of the grant. And bidders agree not to seek early or expedited payments for services delivered. Again, because we have a review process that we go to when we receive these claims. And then as well, we're dealing with our county's auditor controller's office to make payment. And so naturally, as with anything government, there is going to be some time for this process. We are doing our best to streamline this process and make it as quick as possible. But there can always be things that happen. We've known the past couple of years, for example, COVID impacted so many things. There's always something that you never know about that can impact things. So definitely we want to know that you'll be able to handle that. And project match requirements as well. So we were fortunate with our recent ESGCV grant that we did not have a match requirement for that. However, for this regular ESG funding, the annual funding, the subrecipient is required to match 100% of the grant amount. And the matching funds must be used for eligible activities. So essentially, either you will be spending additional funds on the eligible activities you're providing, or maybe you have an in-kind match provider that is providing eligible services to those clients. And there are many sources that these matching funds can come from. They may come from your own funds. They can come from another federal grant. They can come from state or local government grants, private resources. There's a lot of different potential possibilities here. And just to take you a little bit through that funding process. So we started out with the NOFA, or Notice of Funding Availability, from the state, because we are receiving this. The state received an allocation from the federal government, and then they issued a NOFA for interested counties and jurisdictions. So they issued this on August 2021, and we applied for funding as our HWS department on behalf of the County of Riverside's Continuum of Care. So our application was accepted. The state issued or will be issuing a standard agreement to us. And once that process is complete and we have our timelines, and also once we've completed this RFP process and selected our vendors or subrecipients, at that point we will be contracting, beginning that contracting process with you. And then finally, of course, is the fun part, operating the program, going out and helping people, and as well as spending the money. And the funding must be expended by the deadline, and the state will provide us with those deadlines in the future. So that is all that I have on the fiscal side. So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Martha here for some additional information and questions.
Thank you, Brandon. We always appreciate you stepping in.
Thank you.
All right, so the next few slides, it's going to be the questions. So if you have any questions, if you want to type them in, if you want to raise your hand, just so we don't have too many people asking questions at the same time, you're welcome to do either. Just as a quick reminder before everybody logs off, if you can make sure, if you have not already done so, please make sure to sign in so I know who was able to participate today. And if there's any questions, please let me know. We are here to help. Here are some common FAQs. Is food an eligible expense? Eligible under emergency shelter and street outreach. If providing food to persons in a hotel, motel, under emergency shelter, the food must be comparable to what is received in a shelter and not eligible under rapid rehousing or homeless prevention. Next, okay. Are behavioral health services an eligible expense? ESG funds can be used for emergency health services and emergency mental health services under street outreach and emergency shelter components, only available to the extent that the other appropriate health services are inaccessible or unavailable within the community. Next slide. Our behavioral health services and eligible expense. ESG funds can be used for emergency health services and emergency mental health services under street outreach and emergency shelter components, only available to the extent that other appropriate health services are inaccessible or unavailable within the community.